You've probably heard the saying, as boring as watching paint dry. Of course you have. But what if I told you it's not really drying at all, and then it's actually one of the most incredible feats of microconstruction you can see? Well, today we're going behind the brush to unpack the hidden chemical blueprint of modern paint.
So let's start with that big question. When you put a coat of paint on a wall, it goes from a liquid to a solid, right? We call that drying, but that word, it really doesn't even begin to cover what's actually happening. It's so much more than just a bit of water or solvent evaporating into the air.
The truth is way more interesting. The paint is actively building a structure. Down on a molecular level, you've got all these individual molecules locking together in a really organized way, forming this tough three-dimensional network. We call this process curing, and it's all about construction, not evaporation.
To really get our heads around this, we have to stop thinking of paint as just some colorful liquid. It's actually a super sophisticated chemical system, and it's designed with one purpose in mind: to assemble itself into a precise molecular architecture as soon as it's out of the can.
And this is the core idea. The type of network, how dense the connections are, the shape of the molecular chains, all of that directly decides the final properties of the paint. It's just like how the design of a building determines its strength and what it's used for. The design of this molecular network, that determines the paint's hardness, its flexibility, and its durability.
Okay, so if we're building an architecture, what are we building it with? What are the bricks and mortar? The answer is something called functional groups. These are just specific arrangements of atoms on a molecule that act as the connection points. You can think of them like the studs on a Lego brick, just ready to snap together. First up, we've got the hydroxyl group, or OH. Think of this one as the ultimate connector. Its polarity makes it amazing at forming hydrogen bonds, which act like tiny little magnets. This is exactly what lets paint grip so tightly to surfaces like metal or wood. It's the absolute key to adhesion.
Next is the isocyanate group, or -NCO. This guy is the powerful fastener of our molecular construction site. It's super reactive, and it forms these incredibly strong and stable urethane bonds. And what's really cool is that the reaction is super clean. It doesn't create any messy byproducts. That makes it perfect for building those tough, durable coatings you find on cars.
And rounding out our main trio is the epoxy group. Now this one is really neat. It's a three-membered ring, and that structure puts its atoms under a ton of strain. It's basically a coiled spring just waiting to pop open and react. And when it does, it forms these ridiculously strong ether bonds. This is the secret behind that legendary chemical resistance you get from epoxy on, say, a garage floor. So, we've met our key players: the hydroxyl connector, the isocyanate fastener, and that spring-loaded epoxy link. Now, how do they actually link up to build the whole structure? Well, in the world of chemistry, there are two main ways this happens. The first method is called an addition reaction. It's super clean and efficient. You just take A, you add B, and you get AB. Simple as that. Nothing is wasted. This is the method our high-performance isocyanate and epoxy systems use. The second method is a condensation reaction. In this case, A and B still join together, but they also kick out a small byproduct, like water. You see this a lot in industrial coatings that are literally baked to cure, since the heat helps drive off that extra stuff. To make this a bit more real, let's watch one of these connections happen. Here's a typical epoxy reaction. First, an amine from the hardener, that's the second part of a two-part epoxy, it comes up to that strained epoxy ring. Then it attacks and pop! The ring breaks open, forming a brand new, incredibly strong bond. And here's the genius part. The reaction itself creates a new hydroxyl group, our ultimate connector, which is now ready to go make even more bonds. The system builds on itself. So now for the big question. Why does all this microscopic chemistry actually matter? Well, it's because every single choice made down at the molecular level, which building blocks to use, which connection method, all of it translates directly into the real-world performance that we can see and touch. And this brings us to a huge trade-off that's controlled by something called cross-link density. It's basically just how many connections are packed into a certain space. A higher density means you get a harder, more chemically resistant surface. But the catch? The paint becomes more brittle. On the flip side, a lower density gives you more flexibility and impact resistance. Paint chemists are constantly playing with this balance.
And this table really sums up that whole connection perfectly. High cross-link density, you get hardness. Those super strong ether bonds from epoxies, that gives you amazing chemical resistance.
Even the backbone of the molecule matters. For example, structures with what are called aromatic rings are really strong, but they absorb UV light and turn yellow if you leave them outside. So for a car's top coat, chemists will use something called aliphatic chains instead, because they're fantastic at resisting UV. You see? Every property is a direct result of that molecular blueprint.
So the next time you see a freshly painted surface, I really hope you see it a little differently. You're not just looking at a color, you're looking at a marvel of material science. It's a self-assembling architecture designed to protect our entire world, from our homes and cars to our biggest industrial structures.
So let's just quickly recap the key takeaways here. Number 1, paint doesn't just dry, it builds a complex 3D molecular structure. Number 2, functional groups are the specialized building blocks that chemists use to design that structure. And finally, number 3, every single property we care about in a coating, from its hardness to how long it lasts, is a direct result of that microscopic blueprint.
And all of this leads to one final thought. We rely on these chemical blueprints for protection, for durability, and for beauty. But as we keep pushing the limits of technology, we're demanding materials that are smarter, stronger, and more sustainable. So the big question becomes, what new molecular architectures will we have to invent to build the future?